In today's episode, we will talk about how Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine has raised the bar of their annual process of creating MSPE letters for their graduating learners. Let's talk about holistic success. Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Dore, co-founder and VP of Science and Innovation at Acuity Insights. Welcome to this episode of the Holistic Success Show. Here with me today is Tanya Adonizio, who is Associate Dean of Student Affairs at Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Tanya is an emergency medicine physician by training who has been teaching and working in various roles across Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine since it was founded as the Commonwealth Medical School in 2009. I would love to talk to Tanya about so many of the aspects that she works in daily, supporting learners in student affairs at Geisinger. But for this episode, we will focus on how Tanya's team tackles the large task of creating medical students' performance evaluation letters, or MSPEs for short, each year, which are the key component for a learner's application to residency. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the show, Kelly. I'm very excited to share some of our experiences and processes related to the MSPE. I also appreciate forums such as this podcast to be able to learn, share, and network among higher education and academic medicine communities, providing professional growth for ourselves and our teams.
Amazing. Well, it's great to have you on the show, Tanya. So let's get started. To start off, maybe you can describe for us why the medical students' performance evaluations, or MSPEs, is such a critical component of the learner's application for medical residency program, and why they're also maybe so important for medical schools themselves.
I really see the MSPE as one piece of a puzzle in our approach to holistic student support and really in the larger context of transition to residency. I like to use the framework of the right possible residency programs matching up with the right future residents. Students graduating from medical school today are amazing and have such varied backgrounds, talents, and experiences that they're bringing to residency. They have met all the competencies we've defined as institutions and academic medicine broadly, leading them to graduation. And this process of reflecting on their medical school journey individually in their personal statements and reading the school's report in the MSPE can really be a tremendous opportunity for personal and professional growth for our students. I also think the MSPE is an important tool for schools to communicate with the program directors. Obviously, that's our job and role with this. But as I mentioned above, I really think it can support students' reflection and growth during this transition time.
I love that. I like the analogy too of the right program for the right student. And the right student in the right program, because it really speaks to, the individuality and the individual needs of different learners, the different, even if it's in the same specialty for residency, there's still a wide variety of what the programs look like and what they offer, or even thinking, I would imagine, about which specialty itself that they want to maybe go into. And there's a huge opportunity, so much information in medical schools that students get and programs get. It's hard to process it all. So what a great sort of framing of the value of these letters on both sides.
Yes. And really looking at it as that holistic picture of the student and how this piece fits in. And I think it is a tool that we've maybe not tapped into the full potential that it could have. So
Oh, well, let's learn how you're unlocking some of that at Geisinger. So at Geisinger School of Medicine, historically tackled creating MSPEs for each learner. Can you walk me through what your process used to look like? Because, so we talked about, it's a very important piece of information. So how was it created historically?
I'm lucky to have been involved in working in the MSPEs more in a supporting role since our first class graduated in 2013. I took on the Associate Dean of Student Affairs role in 2016, really at a time where the MSPE was changing significantly nationally. And in retrospect, I think it was really um, fortunate that I took the leadership role at that time, because it forced me to kind of join those national discussions at a time when I was new to the process. So I think, as most of the listeners probably know, the AAMC recommendations for revisions to the MSPEs came out in 2016. And so I really just joined as many sessions as I could at every conference I went to. Group on Student Affairs, the AAMC conference, really anywhere where people were talking about these changes. I tried to just ask questions and see what would work best for us. So our process at the time was really just myself and one administrative assistant who worked with a lot of the offices at the school here, like the registrar, faculty, curriculum. But we really just gathered Word documents and did a lot of the copy and paste that probably people are familiar with into an MSPE template that we had created here at the school for each of the students. And this obviously involved a significant number of hours of manual data entry. Now, we were lucky we did have a process for the students to review each of their MSPEs asynchronously and give me feedback on questions or errors that they had found. But again, even that part of the process really involved a substantial amount of time to review, revise, communicate with students. And so thinking about that process and timeline as I took over the associate dean role and was trying to incorporate these changes nationally was really kind of where I started then as a goal to say, how can we make this process more efficient and really produce a better outcome?
Yeah, it sounds like an incredibly manual process too, both for you and for the students as well, in terms of, I would imagine they want to definitely make sure they're putting their best foot forward in that. So the review would be maybe even stressful for some of them, but definitely a high priority for them, because this is the document that program directors receive, sort of as a summary of all their years at medical school. And so that sounds like, for you and one other individual, a
Yes.
significant amount of work that you put in, but truly a labor of love, and that you are committed to doing a great job to represent each individual student, each the program broadly, and really make sure you were setting them up for success in residency too. Um, so kudos
Yes,
for
it was
that.
definitely it was definitely a lot. And I would say the students, I think, really appreciated it, but I do think it was stressful because I don't think there was as much transparency around the process as there could have been, and not as much communication earlier in the process. And I think a lot of those things added just to our stress overall around the way we used to do the MSPE.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, how has your MSPE process changed in the last few years, and how does it look today?
Yeah, I think when you're required to kind of keep producing something, and we couldn't just start from scratch really, because we were required to start the process over again. So we were doing really a continuous quality improvement on it, since we couldn't just completely revise all at once. So I think we tried to set a couple of guiding principles as we started our revision. One, we really wanted it to be clear, concise, and useful. So I spent a fair amount of time talking to program directors to say, like, what would make this a better product for you all from your perspective. We wanted it to be transparent, as I had mentioned, for the students, but also for all parties involved, so that our faculty knew what we included in the MSPE, the students knew, and everybody had agreed to those terms, and what changes we were going to make moving forward. And then that we really spent some dedicated time evolving our processes and procedures really year over year to make it more functional, and also to recognize that the well-being of all of us who were involved in the process was an important part too.
I love that.
So we started really thinking about the partnership. So first we worked who are all the people that contribute to it. So that's where we started working with faculty on the quality of the narratives that go into the MSPE. And then with curriculum on the collection and sharing of the narratives with us to streamline that process. We also started working we have career coaches that work individually with the students, and they actually work with the students to write their noteworthy characteristics that we then incorporate into the process.
I love that.
So then we worked on the transparency part, and I started sharing with the students early on in med school what is the structure of our MSPE, and then we'd update them each year as we made these improvements to our template, to our process, and then really working on that template and process, as I had mentioned at the end, which was really where how could we move away from those things that it could involve potential human error, right? That copying and pasting into individual student things. How could we develop a process and a system that decreased that potential for error and was able to adapt to curriculum changes, the pandemic, and all the things that we really at the time couldn't anticipate were going to be coming our way.
That's amazing. And I do like that when you think about those who were involved in shaping it, you really took the approach from all angles. Having program directors make sure that your goals of having a clear and concise document actually met their needs, because at the end of the day, you can produce something that's beautiful and perfect and the students love it and the programs love it. But if the program directors can't use it, then it's sort of missing the point. So I like that you also included that end user, and kept the students in the loop along the way, so they could see the evolution of it. It wasn't coming as a shock. They could understand why the changes were being made, how it supported what they were trying to do. And I would imagine, and I'm curious, Tanya, did you find either with the coaches or sort of with that early insight about what was going on and how the MSPE was going to evolve, did they start thinking at all about what they wanted their MSP to look like at the end, or think about it rather than just receiving it at the end and reacting to it? Mm-hmm. Did it ever become part of their journey, or was that part of the goal in this?
I do think it has become that, really. So now our career coaches really start to, after we introduce it early in medical school, the career coaches start to ask the students, so as you're thinking about what you're participating in during medical school, how might this ultimately translate into a noteworthy characteristic for you? So if research is something that you're telling me is important to you, then how can you be intentional about what you get involved in? And ultimately, oh yes, that's going to translate to your CV. It could translate into a noteworthy characteristic. Mm-hmm. So that's part of really how I think we've been able to use it in different ways as a tool for the students' professional growth as well.
I really like that. And maybe some of these are intentional and maybe some very positive unintentional consequences too. What are with all of these changes, because you described several evolutions that you've gone through with this MSPE, what are some of the efficiencies and benefits that you've noticed as a result of the new process, or that you've heard come back from other folks involved?
Yeah, I think we've really had several benefits and efficiencies. I think first, probably most evident for me on a daily basis is really the decreased individual investment of time, faculty and staff, in things like the manual copying and pasting. I think people have now trust in the process and that they understand the process. So whether it's the faculty on writing the narratives, where they enter them, and knowing then how that transfers into the student's MSPE, I think has really improved everyone's attitude really about participating in the process, because it just has become uh, so much smoother. And really, I think we tried to listen to all the stakeholders along the way on where those real pain points were. And then I think the transparency part, like we were talking about, has really been another enhancement or benefit, and how the students are now able to see how they can use it as one of their tools.
So, Tanya, those changes sound really impressive. Partnerships, transparency, and thinking about your template. Now, can you walk me through a little bit about what that looks like for you, how it's mapped out in the actual process?
Absolutely. Yeah. So really, each year, once the MSPEs are completed at the end of September, we start that process on revising the template and our actual timeline and process. We review any changes to the template with our stakeholders and then present to the curriculum committee. So that part is usually completed by January, I would say. And then we revise our project management timeline and try and communicate all of those changes to the different stakeholder groups, as we talked about, the students, faculty, staff that are involved. So then we really move into the gathering and organizing data part, which is obviously, I think, the most time consuming and critical part. And there we really understand that providing the students with the information about reviewing their data is critical. And we try and space that out throughout their clerkship year, and now even into that final phase or year of their curriculum, where we're adding some of that those narratives as well. So working with our registrar's office here as an example, the registrar now sends students reminders every time they have a narrative that's posted, for them to go in and review that content, to again decrease any surprises as we get to that final cumulative look in the MSPE. So then by late spring, early summer, we really move into the editing process for our MSPE. Years ago, we started informally asking individuals at the school to proofread for us. And then that became a QI project in and of itself a couple of years ago, to where now we have a stable cohort of editors here that receive specific training on the MSPE, as well as recognition for their efforts here at the school. And that standardization, again, has helped a lot. Our editors now all use the same format and reviewing for things like grammar. So we decided as a school, we're going to use Oxford commas as our sort of standard. And we also asked the students to let us know about their preferred name and personal pronouns, and the editors know to focus on consistencies there across. So then once the editing's done, the students actually now get to meet with their regional assistant student affairs deans, and they review the draft of their MSPE. And so that's a time where they really get to see that near final format with their advisor. And it really helps, I think, to frame not just the asynchronous looking at the draft of their MSPE, but it's a real-time discussion on how they can use that document, as we had talked about earlier, in those ways to support their transition to medical school. So That's our process.
That's amazing. I love that you've sort of taken the opportunity to almost do quality improvement each year, and to look at the process, and it's just now built in. So there's expectations about trying to make it better for all of the folks involved. I also heard, and I'm excited about this one, that students get reminders when there's a new narrative posted. What an opportunity to like really take on that feedback or those comments as well in a time that's outside of the exact moment where maybe where they were in the clinical scenario where they were, going off to see another patient or something, and they might not have had that chance to be reflective. This really does give them another opportunity to reflect on those important narrative comments.
Yeah, it really does. I think it helps support their growth through the year, and it also, I think, highlights the partnerships. Is developing that relationship with our registrar to say, I think their feedback to the students and reminder and interaction with the students is really important, and helps to build that sense of community around the process of the MSPE.
If there are folks who are responsible for the MSPE in their organization and you wanted them to take away, two or three pieces of advice that you would have after, being involved in this for so long, but also taking it on its journey of evolution, what advice would you give someone else?
Yeah, I think one is finding a community to really share best practices. I hear a lot of discussion again. I feel like the MSPE discussion had been a little bit quieter for a few years. It was certainly busy in 2016, 17, 18 even. And then it seemed to not be as much a part of the national discussion. But I think now that we're moving kind of out of the pandemic taking so much of our time in managing a school, we're starting to talk about it again. So I think really forums like this or opportunities to share with peers is great. So I think that sharing of best practices is huge because I'm continuing to evolve ours as well here at the school. And then I think really intentionally setting for your institution the amount of support individuals, a project timeline that and process that really is honest with the resources that you have available, and to recognize that the stress of the MSPE is real, and that taking all of our well-being into account is important. And so as we're all making decisions about priorities and investment of resources, thinking about that a little bit more holistically can possibly help to do, when some of those difficult decisions come down on where do we spend our time and resources in trying to complete this. Because we know we all have to get the MSPE completed. It's an accreditation requirement. It's something that each school has to do. So how can we invest those resources in the way that will get us the outcome, but keeping all the people at the center, I think is really important.
I love that you really highlighted that well-being piece too. I think that's so important because we know the likelihood of burnout, whether it's for faculty or staff or students, because they are so committed to excellence and doing a great job and serving the mission of the school, et cetera. And thinking about, as we're allocating resources, how do we ensure we're doing our best and that we're investing back into folks as well so that they can continue to do their best. I thank you for highlighting that. I think that's a great take-home message broadly as well. So Tanya, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us and for a great discussion today. I'd love to chat more about what you're doing at Geisinger, but as a starting point, this conversation was so great and informative to me. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Kelly, for having me today. It was great to share.
Perfect. And to all of you, thank you for watching and listening. And with that, we'll catch you in the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode of our show, please be sure to check out the other episodes. And don't forget to subscribe. We have a new episode releasing every week.